The Virlek delegation stepped off their shimmering transport ship, their elongated forms glistening under the Earth's sun. Their carapace-like skin shimmered in shades of blue and green, shifting in a rhythm that reflected both their advanced biology and their unease. Standing at the edge of the human training base, Commander KLVA adjusted his translator device, a faint chime echoing as it synchronized with the Earth language database. Primitive, yet persistent, KLVA murmured, observing the angular structures of the human military installation. Beside him, Cadet Zeltar tilted his head, his eyes, dark orbs capable of seeing across the electromagnetic spectrum, narrowing at the sight of humans bustling around in heavy gear. They carry themselves with confidence, Commander. Yet they lack our technology, our precision, Zeltar replied, his tone laced with the quiet superiority characteristic of their species. KLVA inclined his head, but a flicker of doubt crept into his mind. The Galactic Exchange Program, initiated to foster cooperation between species, had always been a symbolic gesture. For the Virlek, it was a chance to observe how lesser-developed civilizations managed combat and resource allocation. They had not expected to encounter much worth learning on Earth. "Welcome to Fort Ironclad," boomed a voice, startling the Virlek from their thoughts. A human strode toward them, his stance relaxed but authoritative. Clad in fatigues, his face weathered by years of service, Captain Jonathan Reeve extended a hand, a gesture that the Virlek had studied but never quite understood. KLVA hesitated, then extended one of his 3 dexterous fingers to meet Reeve's grasp. The contact was brief but firm, a curious mix of organic warmth and latent strength. "We are honored to partake in this exchange," KLVA said, his words measured. Reeve chuckled. "You might rethink that honor once you see what we've got planned. This isn't a sightseeing tour, Commander." The Virlek delegation followed Reeve into the heart of the base, their eyes scanning every detail. Rows of human soldiers ran drills, their movements unrefined but efficient. There was an energy, a fire, in their every action that perplexed the Virlek. These humans lacked the precision of automated drones or the elegance of telepathic combat strategies, yet there was no denying the determination in their faces. "You'll start by observing our basic combat training," Reeve said, leading them to an elevated platform overlooking a vast obstacle course. "We call it the Grinder. Recruits start here to build endurance, adaptability, and teamwork." Below, cadets were already running through mud, scaling walls, and navigating electrified wires. Shouts of encouragement and groans of exertion filled the air. One soldier slipped in the muck but was hauled to his feet by a comrade before continuing. Zeltar watched, baffled. Why endure such inefficiency? Why not rely on drones or neural simulation? Reeve smirked. "Because war isn't fought in perfect conditions, my friend. Out there, it's messy. You've got to rely on your body, your instincts, and the person next to you." KLVA said nothing, but his shifting hues betrayed his unease. The display wasn't what he expected, it was raw, chaotic, and oddly effective. "Ready for the next part?" Reeve asked, a glint in his eye. That was just the warm-up. The Virlek delegation stiffened as an explosion rang out in the distance, marking the start of the live-fire exercise. The morning sun had barely climbed over the horizon when the Virlek cadets found themselves standing at the edge of the Grinder. The obstacle course loomed before them, a sprawling labyrinth of mud pits, rope climbs, and jagged walls, all interconnected by trails of uneven terrain. The air smelled of damp earth and sweat, a harsh, unrefined atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the sterile training environments the Virlek were accustomed to. "Today, you'll observe what we call basic drills," Captain Reeve announced, his tone as casual as if he were discussing the weather. "Our recruits go through this every day to build their strength, stamina, and coordination." Commander KLVA folded his arms, his chitinous skin shifting to a pale green, a subtle sign of skepticism. "This physical ordeal is a cornerstone of your training? Surely, a more efficient method exists." Reeve chuckled. "Efficiency's great until the real world hits. Out there, you're not in a simulation or relying on perfect conditions. You've got to adapt, or die." The Virlek delegation remained silent, but the statement lingered like a challenge. Below them, the human trainees lined up at the starting point, their expressions a mix of focus and anticipation. A whistle blew, and chaos erupted. The first wave of recruits surged forward, splashing into knee-deep mud that clung to their legs like an adhesive. Some stumbled, faces planting into the muck, only to claw their way back up and press on. Others vaulted over walls with fluid agility, calling out encouragement to those behind them. The Virlik watched, their wide eyes narrowing in confusion. "They're struggling," Cadet Zeltar observed, tilting his head. "Why not pause to recalibrate? They waste energy." Reeve leaned on the railing, a wry smile on his face. "Struggle's the point. They're learning to push through failure, to adapt when things don't go as planned. Watch." As the cadets reached the first obstacle, a towering wall slick with water, one trainee lost their grip and slid back to the ground. Instead of retreating, the soldier tried again, this time hoisting another recruit over the edge before being pulled up in turn. The display of teamwork was alien to the Virlik, whose own combat training prioritized individual precision and self-sufficiency. They assist one another, even at the expense of their own progress? KLVA asked, his tone edged with disbelief. "That's right," Reeve replied. "Because in the field, no one wins alone. You survive by having each other's backs." The next stage of the course intensified. Recruits crawled under low-hanging wires while live rounds zipped overhead, the sound sharp and unforgiving. The Virlik delegation recoiled slightly as the first shots rang out, but the humans didn't flinch. They pressed forward with grim determination, their faces streaked with dirt and sweat. Zeltar's antennae twitched. This level of physical exertion is unnecessary. Their technology should compensate for such limitations. Reeve's expression grew serious. Technology fails. Muscles don't. Grit doesn't. And if you can't handle the basics, you're dead weight in a fight. As the final group of trainees stumbled across the finish line, gasping for air but grinning with triumph, Reeve turned back to the Virlik. "So, what did you think? Not as polished as your simulations, huh?" KLVA hesitated, his hues flickering uncertainly. There was no denying the inefficiency of the methods, but there was also no denying their results. These humans had something the Virlik training lacked, a raw, unrelenting spirit. "Interesting," KLVA finally said. "But I wonder, how do they fare under more complex scenarios?" Reeve's grin widened. "Funny you should ask. Next up is live combat training. Care to join in?" The Virlik exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time, Zeltar felt a flicker of something unfamiliar in his chest, a blend of curiosity and trepidation. "Very well," KLVA replied, his voice steady. "Show us what else humans are capable of." As the sun rose higher, the grinder transformed into a battlefield, and the Virlik braced themselves for a lesson unlike any they had ever imagined. The jungle stretched out in every direction, a cacophony of unfamiliar sounds echoing through the dense foliage. The air was thick with humidity, clinging to the Virlik cadets like an unwelcome second skin. Above, the canopy filtered the sunlight into fragmented beams, giving the terrain an otherworldly glow. Commander KLVA scanned the horizon, his advanced vision picking out every detail, but even he could not suppress the unease gnawing at him. "This environment is chaotic," Cadet Zeltar muttered, his voice tight. "No order. No structure. How do they navigate this without advanced mapping systems?" "You're about to find out," Captain Reeve said, stepping through the undergrowth with the ease of someone who had spent a lifetime in such conditions. "This is the survival trial. No technology. No backup. Just your wits and instincts." The Virlik delegation, equipped with nothing more than basic supplies issued by their human counterparts, had been dropped into the heart of one of Earth's most unforgiving terrains. The mission: survive for 48 hours and reach the designated extraction point. Reeve turned to the group, a smirk playing at his lips. "We're keeping it simple for you. Just make it out alive." KLVA's hues flickered between green and amber, skepticism and irritation. "Our species excels at survival in extreme conditions, Captain. Your methods will not prove challenging." Reeve shrugged. "We'll see." The first few hours were deceptively calm. The Virlik moved with precision, their innate sense of direction allowing them to traverse the jungle efficiently. They avoided tangled roots and venomous wildlife with the ease of a species accustomed to calculated movement. But as the day stretched on, the chaos of the environment began to wear on them. The heat sapped their energy, and the absence of familiar tools left them disoriented. By contrast, the human trainees seemed to thrive. They worked in pairs or small groups, their movements slower but deliberate. One group paused to build a crude shelter, another to gather water from a nearby stream. The Virlek watched, puzzled by the inefficiency of it all. "This is absurd," Zeltar grumbled as he wiped a layer of grime from his carapace. "They waste time and energy on these primitive tasks." "They adapt," KLVA corrected, though his tone was grudging. "Watch." Nearby, a human trainee crouched beside a cluster of leaves, carefully tying them into a makeshift water pouch. Another lit a small fire using nothing more than a spark and dry kindling. Despite the simplicity of their tools, the humans seemed at ease, even laughing quietly as they worked. The Virlek attempted to emulate them, but frustration mounted quickly. Without their technology, they struggled to light fires or purify water. When night fell, the darkness was absolute, and the sounds of predators grew closer. The humans huddled together, sharing warmth and stories that kept their morale high. The Virlek sat apart, their silence heavy with tension. By the second day, exhaustion had begun to take its toll. Zeltar stumbled over a root, his normally graceful movements faltering. A human trainee immediately offered him a hand. "You good?" the soldier asked, concern etched on his face. Zeltar hesitated, pride warring with necessity. Finally, he accepted the help, standing unsteadily. "I am functional," he said, his voice softer than usual. As they neared the extraction point, a sudden storm swept through the jungle, turning the ground into a slippery mess. A Virlek cadet lost their footing, sliding toward a ravine. Before anyone could react, a human trainee dove after them, catching the alien by the arm and hauling them to safety. The Virlek watched in stunned silence. The act defied logic. The human had risked their life without hesitation for someone they barely knew. "Why would you do that?" KLVA asked, his voice low. The human shrugged, brushing mud from their uniform. "Because that's what we do. Out here, we've got each other's backs. No one gets left behind." As the extraction shuttle arrived, KLVA stared at the humans, their resilience and camaraderie etched into his memory. For the first time, he wondered if the Virlek had underestimated more than just human training, they had underestimated humanity itself. The Virlek delegation entered the dimly lit training facility with trepidation, their bioluminescent hues flickering faintly in the low light. The air inside was heavy, carrying a sense of foreboding that was unlike anything they had experienced on Earth thus far. A single human soldier stood at the front of the room, his face stoic and his voice calm as he addressed the group. "Welcome to the Grinder's final stage, the psychological test," the instructor announced, his piercing eyes sweeping over the Virlek cadets. "Out there, the mind is often the first to break in battle. This is where we make sure it doesn't." Commander KLVA exchanged a glance with Cadet Zeltar, whose hues shifted uncertainly. They had been prepared for physical trials and survival scenarios, but the idea of a test designed to break one's mental resilience was foreign to the Virlek way of thinking. Their training relied on logic and strategy, not emotional fortitude. "What does this test entail?" KLVA asked, his voice steady but tinged with skepticism. The instructor's lips curved into a faint, humorless smile. "You'll see. Each of you will face it alone. It's not about winning or losing, it's about seeing who you are when the pressure's on." The Virlek were escorted into separate chambers, each one equipped with little more than a chair and a screen. KLVA took a seat, his posture rigid as the lights dimmed further. The screen flickered to life, displaying a simulation that was unnervingly realistic. At first, the scenarios were straightforward, combat engagements and high-stakes decision-making. KLVA navigated them with precision, his tactical mind assessing threats and executing solutions with ease. But then, the test shifted. The simulation presented him with a choice: sacrifice an ally to ensure the success of a mission or risk total failure to save them. The Virlek commander hesitated, his mind racing. For his species, the answer was clear: efficiency and mission success always came first. Yet, as the simulation played out, he couldn't ignore the faces of the simulated allies, their pleas for help cutting through his logic like a blade. In another chamber, Zeltar was grappling with a different scenario. The screen showed a simulated ambush, and his comrades fell one by one. Despite his best efforts, he couldn't save them. The simulation reset, presenting the same outcome again and again, each failure gnawing at his resolve. "This is pointless," Zeltar muttered, his hues dimming. "Why repeat what cannot be changed?" Meanwhile, the human trainees faced their own trials. Their simulations seemed just as grueling, yet they emerged from their chambers battered but unbroken, exchanging nods of encouragement. For them, failure wasn't an end, it was a lesson. When the Virlek regrouped, the difference in their reactions was stark. Kelvier's hues shifted erratically, his thoughts tangled by the ethical dilemmas he had faced. Zeltar looked shaken, his usual confidence replaced by a quiet introspection. Captain Reeve stood before them, his expression unreadable. "You've seen the worst of yourselves in there," he said. "Now you know what it takes to keep going when everything falls apart." Kelvier stepped forward, his voice hesitant. "You train your soldiers to endure not just physical pain, but emotional turmoil." "Why?" Reeves' gaze softened, but his tone remained firm. "Because war doesn't just test your body, it tests your soul. If you can survive yourself, you can survive anything." The Virlek delegation left the facility in silence, their minds weighed down by the experience. For the first time, they understood that humanity's strength wasn't just in their adaptability or tenacity, it was in their unyielding capacity to face their own darkness and emerge stronger. Kelvier looked at the humans with a newfound respect, the realization settling in his mind like an unshakable truth. Their species had much to learn, not from Earth's technology, but from its unbreakable spirit. The sun had barely risen, yet the training grounds were alive with the hum of preparation. Humans and Virlek stood side by side, a sight that would have been unthinkable just days ago. Despite their initial skepticism, the alien cadets had slowly begun to understand, and, begrudgingly, respect, the humans' unorthodox methods. Now, they were about to face their greatest test yet, a simulated combat scenario designed to push both groups to their limits. "This is no ordinary drill," Captain Reeve announced, pacing before the assembled group. His voice carried the weight of authority, silencing even the whispers among the human recruits. "Today, you'll work as a single unit. Humans and Virlek, together. Your objective is simple: secure the objective and make it out alive." Kelvier stood at the forefront of the Virlek group, his chitinous skin shimmering in a steady hue of determination. He had spent the previous night analyzing human behavior, their strange reliance on camaraderie, and their baffling ability to persevere under conditions that would break most species. He still didn't fully understand it, but he couldn't deny its effectiveness. "We are prepared," Kelvier said, his voice calm but resolute. "Your methods are unconventional, but we will adapt." Reeve grinned. "Good. Let's see what you've learned." The scenario began with the crack of distant explosions and the shrill blare of an alarm. The combined team of humans and Virlek surged forward, navigating a simulated urban battlefield. Smoke and debris filled the air, creating a chaotic, disorienting environment. The Virlek moved with precision, their natural agility and advanced reflexes allowing them to dodge incoming fire with ease. But it was the humans who truly shined in the chaos. Where the Virlek hesitated to regroup after an ambush, the humans improvised, shouting orders and coordinating with unspoken understanding. Over there, a human recruit shouted, pointing to a crumbling building where simulated hostiles had taken position. Without waiting for confirmation, he led a small group, using cover and suppressive fire to neutralize the threat. A Virlek cadet, Zeltar, followed closely, his movements mimicking the humans he had been observing. As the battle raged on, an explosion tore through the ground near their position, scattering the group. Zeltar landed hard, his vision spinning. Before he could recover, a hand grasped his shoulder and pulled him to his feet. "You okay?" the human recruit asked, his voice laced with concern. Zeltar hesitated, the question catching him off guard. "I am functional. Thank you." The human grinned, slapping Zeltar's back before sprinting toward the next objective. For the first time, Zeltar felt something he couldn't quite name, an unfamiliar warmth that seemed to strengthen his resolve. The mission reached its climax when the team was cornered in an open plaza, surrounded by simulated hostiles. KLVA took command, his voice cutting through the chaos. Humans, provide covering fire. Virlek, flank from the right. Move now. The combined effort was seamless. The humans' relentless determination paired with the Virlek's precision created a strategy neither group could have executed alone. When the final hostile was neutralized, the silence was deafening, broken only by the heavy breathing of the team. "Well done," Reeve said, stepping into the plaza. His expression was a mix of pride and amusement. "I didn't think you'd pull it off, but you proved me wrong." KLV-8 approached him, his hues shifting to a soft green, a sign of respect among the Virlek. "Your methods may lack elegance, but they are undeniably effective. Today, we were not two species. We were one unit." Reeve nodded, his grin returning. "That's the point. Out there, it doesn't matter where you're from. What matters is who's beside you." As the group made their way back to base, humans and Virlek walked together, their earlier barriers eroded by shared struggle and triumph. KLVA couldn't shake the realization that this lesson, this bond, was more valuable than any technological advantage his people had ever developed. For the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope that their species could truly learn from humanity, not just about war, but about the strength that came from unity. The morning sky was painted with streaks of gray as storm clouds gathered on the horizon, a fitting prelude to the Virlek and human team's final test. The training grounds, usually bustling with organized drills, were eerily quiet. This wasn't just another exercise, it was the culmination of everything they had endured together. Captain Reeve stood at the front, his expression somber as he addressed the group. "This is it. A full-scale live simulation. Hostiles will be relentless, conditions will be brutal, and the objective will require every ounce of skill, courage, and teamwork you've got. Fail, and it won't just mean losing the exercise, it'll mean questioning everything you've learned." Commander KLVA, standing with his Virlek delegation, nodded firmly. Over the past days, his perceptions of humanity had shifted. The chaotic, unpredictable species had proven to be more than capable, their strengths lying not in precision or technology but in their raw adaptability and unyielding spirit. Today, he intended to see if the bond they had forged could truly hold under pressure. The simulation began with a jarring explosion that echoed across the terrain. Smoke billowed into the air as both teams sprang into action. The mission: extract a wounded ally trapped deep within hostile territory. The path was treacherous, littered with enemy ambushes, environmental hazards, and unforgiving terrain. The group advanced cautiously through the dense forest, their every movement coordinated yet instinctively adaptive. KLVA took point, his enhanced vision scanning for threats, while Reeve and a small contingent covered the flanks. A sudden hail of simulated gunfire erupted from the left, forcing the team to dive for cover. "Suppressive fire, now!" Reeve barked. Human trainees opened fire, their weapons blazing as Virlek cadets flanked the attackers with calculated precision. The engagement was swift and decisive, a seamless blend of human grit and Virlek efficiency. For the first time, KLVA felt a surge of pride, not just for his own kind, but for the team as a whole. As they pressed deeper into the simulation zone, the weather turned against them. Rain poured from the heavens, turning the ground into a treacherous mire. Visibility dropped, and tensions rose. When they reached the designated extraction site, they found it surrounded by hostiles. The simulated wounded ally lay in the center, a trap designed to push the team to their breaking point. "Options?" KLVA asked, his hues flickering between amber and green. Reeve wiped rain from his face, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We create a diversion. Humans draw their fire while your team retrieves the target." KLVA nodded. "Agreed. But you'll need covering fire on your retreat." "Leave that to us," Reeve said with a grin. "We're good at messy exits." The plan unfolded with precision. The humans charged forward, drawing fire with calculated recklessness while the Virlek moved with surgical precision to extract the target. The simulated hostiles pressed hard, but the team held their ground, their unity overcoming every challenge. When the final hostile was neutralized and the target secured, the group staggered back to the extraction point. They were soaked, exhausted, and bruised, but victorious. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the sound of their labored breathing. "Well done," Reeve said, his voice thick with emotion. "You didn't just survive. You thrived." KLVA stepped forward, his hues glowing a steady green. "Your methods, while unconventional, have taught us more than we expected. Today, we saw not just strength but unity, the kind that transcends species. It is admirable." Reeve chuckled, extending a hand. "Glad to hear it, Commander. So, think we're ready to join the galactic stage?" KLVA grasped his hand, a gesture he had come to understand as deeply symbolic. "More than ready. If today proved anything, it's that humanity's strength lies not in its technology or strategy but in its indomitable spirit." As the teams boarded the extraction transport, KLVA gazed out at the stormy horizon, his mind racing with possibilities. He had come to Earth expecting to witness primitive training and outdated methods. Instead, he had found something far more profound, an unshakable will, a relentless determination, and a bond that turned individuals into something greater than the sum of their parts. The storm rumbled in the distance, but for the first time, KLVA felt a clarity that rivaled the lightning's brilliance. Humanity was far more than the galaxy had anticipated. They weren't just survivors, they were a force to be reckoned with. And the Virlek, for all their advancements, had much to learn.